Hotep World. This your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka the Chosen Few, aka the real bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, world, may your name live on forever and may your memory never die. Today, I'm going to be reading a little bit out of this book called Messages, right? The world's most documented extraterrestrial contact story. And it's about the life of a guy named Stan Romanek. Now, I know what some of you have already thinking. Aliens ain't real. Extraterrestrials aren't real. UFOs aren't real. Abductions aren't real. Okay, I got it. But some people out there, myself included, I think that extraterrestrials are real. I think UFOs are real. And I think that abductions are real. Now, can I prove it? No, it's a belief, so I'll readily admit that. But for those of you who may be interested in these types of conversations, the real bookworm would like to go into another book about this guy, Stan Romanek, who claims to have seen several UFOs and who claims to have been abducted several times. Now, one of his abductions took place in around 2001. And what he did after that abduction event, he went and saw a hypnotist to try to pull up memories of what happened during that abduction. So what I'm going to read is the section of the book where he's talking about the information that he was able to recall based on his hypnosis. This is very, very interesting. And again, like I said, I can't say whether it's true or false, real or fake, but I want to share this with you guys and I want to read out of this today. So it's actually chapter 11 of his book, and the chapter title is Journey into the Subconscious, My First Regression and Recalled Abduction. So let me see when he first starts to talk about, yes, we'll start right here. He says, detailed memories came pouring out of me during that session. Everything that had happened within the past year and everything that had happened within the past year and a half finally came into focus, especially the early morning abduction of September 20th, 2001. All of those shadowy events were now vivid memories, and I suddenly found myself able to recall everything, even down to the strange odors in the air. Most of all, however, I began to remember what happened after the possum people knocked me out on the balcony of my apartment. What followed could only be considered one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. So he's going to be talking about what he learned from hypnotic suggestions, right? From being hypnotized, rather, about an abduction event that took place at his apartment. Now, inside of the book, he actually gives us drawings that he made of the extraterrestrials. So Stan Romanek is saying that these three beings came to his apartment in 2001 and abducted him out of his apartment. You guys see that? Those three beings are the beings that abducted him. So he goes on to say, I recounted in my regression that shortly after being rendered unconscious on the balcony, once I regained consciousness, I found myself standing upright, completely naked, inside of some brightly lit room, stuck to what I can best describe as a brightly illuminated wall of some kind. As I tried to move, it felt as if the force of gravity itself was holding me down, completely immobilizing me. It reminded me of the ride at an amusement park that spins around, holding a person against the wall with centrifugal force. The difference was that this was no ride, and this force was much stronger. So much stronger, in fact, that I was only able to slightly move my head, feet, and hands. Later, I recalled there being hundreds of round, copper-colored discs, roughly the size of quarters, embedded in the wall about every 12 inches or so. I wonder now if these were not what were responsible for holding me so securely to the wall. Looking down, I also noticed that there were copper-colored bands around my ankles and wrists, and from each band was a thin wire connecting it to a point in the wall. So he's saying that after he encountered these extraterrestrial beings at his apartment, he went unconscious. When he regained consciousness again, he was inside of the some actual compartment or area, which we'll believe to be the ship. He was actually on the extraterrestrial ship, and his body was suspended and pinned against a wall, much like the rides at an amusement park that you get in and they spin around real fast and you actually get stuck to the wall. You're not on the ground. He says that there were about quarter-sized copper-colored circles about 12 inches apart all over the walls of the room that he was in. And he also says that there were copper-colored bands holding his wrists and his ankles securely to the wall. And these bands had wires coming out of them going into the wall. So he goes on to say, the area where I was standing appeared to be a trough of some kind, because just 3 feet away from my toes was a slightly raised curve, apparently designed to contain or redirect fluids. So he's saying that directly below him there was like a trough, below his feet it was like dipped in with like a curve over it. And he says that like he assumed that it looked like it was to redirect fluid. So you can imagine if he's attached to this wall and he urinates on himself, or if he has any kind of cuts and he's bleeding, any type of fluids are coming from his body, then those fluids would go into that trough. And since it has that curve on it, those fluids would travel down this trough or be contained in this trough and not just spread out over the entire floor. He says, everything around me seemed to have been constructed for something much smaller than a human being, and all the edges were rounded. As far as I could tell, there were no right angles or sharp corners anywhere in the room. The lighting was bluish white, coming from all around me, as though it were being emanated from the walls and ceilings themselves. In the middle of this room was a platform similar to a surgeon's table with rounded edges, molded directly into the floor. In fact, everything appeared to have been molded from a single material. Above the surgeon's table was a long teardrop-shaped tube coming out of the ceiling that contained various lights and instruments. I felt as though I was imprisoned in a deranged doctor's office. Just beyond the table, on the other side of the room, was a doorway through which 3 small figures passed. As the beings approached, I could see that they were the same possum people that had so brazenly walked into my apartment, including the one I tried to throw off the balcony. So inside of this room, everything seems like it's made from one piece of material, and everything has rounded edges. So in the center of the room, he sees what he is describing as a surgeon's table based on his level of understanding. So he sees some type of table inside of this room, in the middle of this room, and above that there's something hanging from the ceiling that is has lights and instruments inside of it. Okay, and he says that from the size of the room and from the size of the things in the room, it appears that this room was created for people or for beings that were smaller than human beings. And now on the other side of the room, there was some type of a door, right? That the same 3 beings that came to his apartment and abducted him, these same 3 beings came through this door and approached him. He saw the same beings that he saw at his apartment. He says, to say I was frightened would be an understatement. Had I been able to scream, I'd have done so with all my might. The more frightened I got, however, the stranger the expressions on the bizarre faces became, almost as if my own fear made them uncomfortable. Suddenly, a calming thought filled my head. It's okay, you need to calm down. It was the same soothing words I'd recalled hearing when I'd first encountered the 3 of them in my apartment. Clearly, they had to be telepathic, but there was no discernible movement of their tiny mouths when the words echoed through my head. So he says that the fact that he was afraid, it made it appear that these extraterrestrials were uncomfortable by his fear, and they were able to communicate with him through some type of telepathic means, because they began to try to tell him to calm down, but their mouths were not moving and there was no audible voices being heard. He heard them talking to him inside of his head. And you will notice if you study people interacting that claim to have interacted with extraterrestrials, a lot of people claim to interact and communicate with them based on telepathic means. So it's a common thing that extraterrestrials are telepathic. As the strange, calming thoughts filled my head, the female was staring right at me, as if to let me know that it was she who was putting them there. Coming closer, she placed her long, slender hand on my shoulder, and I instantly felt an inexplicable warmth spread across my entire being. Once again, a thought breezed through my head, reassuring me that everything was going to be all right, and that I simply needed to calm down, which seemed to be sufficient to prevent me from becoming completely hysterical. Without removing her hand from my shoulder, she reached behind me with her other hand to touch something on the wall. Instantly, the wall released me, and I immediately found myself standing on the floor, no longer restrained. Had I tried, I think it would have been easy for me to break the wires attached to my wrist and ankle bands, but for some reason it never occurred to me to try. Instead of breaking the wires, I tried removing the bands themselves, but each time I twisted or pulled on them, I felt small electrical charges course through them. When the female noticed what I was doing, she looked straight at me. "To protect you," she said, obviously trying to explain what the devices were for. A few seconds later, the female gently turned me around until I was facing the wall. As if on cue, one of the males stepped forward. Hanging from his shoulder strap was an instrument of some kind. It appeared to be a transparent box with a small compartment on one end and a long, narrow tube on the other end, with what reminded me of a tiny version of a melon baller at the end. As the male approached, I felt him wipe my lower back with something, which was immediately followed by intense pain. I looked to see what he was doing, and it appeared that he was scraping tissue from my lower back. The second time he did this, I felt a slight touch on the back of my head, which I think rendered me unconscious because I cannot remember what happened next. All I know is that I awoke sitting on the platform in the center of the room where the female was applying a liquid to the sores on my wrist. Sitting there on the platform, I was still very scared, with my brain racing 1,000,000 miles per second, but I at least had the presence of mind to try and dialogue with my captor, who, at the very least, did not appear to be threatening. Of course, it was all done telepathically, with me not only reading her thoughts, but being able to send my own. In retrospect, I suspect telepathic communication will be the only way to bridge whatever language barrier existed between my host and their guest. So I guess our method of communication was not only more efficient, but probably essential if we were to understand each other. Fortunately, it seemed I took to telepathic communications quickly, and soon I became good at distinguishing their thoughts from my own, resulting in a crude but effective dialogue developing between us. Apparently, this interchange had a calming effect on me, and I remember asking them the sort of questions one would normally ask an extraterrestrial being if one had the chance to do so: where they came from, how they got here, what they were doing here. However, the answers weren't giving me in the form of words, but in symbols or drawings. For instance, when I wondered where these beings came from, I saw a drawing in my mind. When I wondered how they traveled to Earth, once again I received symbols and diagrams in my head in answer to my questions. Every time I had a concern or a question, there was an instant telepathic reply, making for a lively, if somewhat confusing, discourse. Eventually, I became conscious of a sense of increased urgency in her thoughts, as though she were trying to tell me something important. "Something significant is about to happen," she told me. I presumed she meant on Earth, but I couldn't be certain. She seemed to want to tell me more, but the moment she realized I was beginning to grasp her ideas, she stepped back. Then she looked straight into my eyes, and I felt a flood of information enter my brain, akin to a computer uploading a database. It was more information than I could logically process, and the pressure of it drove me to my knees. She stopped and waited for me to regain my composure. Once I did so, she seemed ready to try again. Only this time, the images were more discernible, as though she had reduced the volume so my brain could make better sense of what I was seeing. Immediately, images began to fill my head. Images of winds so strong they scoured the roads and highways off of the earth, and tidal waves covering entire cities. There were fires everywhere. The whole planet seemed to be in convulsions as disaster after disaster overtook it. I asked out loud, "Is this what's going to happen? Is this what you're showing me? When is it going to happen?" There was no answer. It would be later that I would realize that she was implying that these were events that could happen on Earth if things didn't change, not that they were destined to happen. Whatever she was trying to convey to me was both confusing and extremely disturbing, to say the least. Sitting there, panic-stricken, I asked again, "When are these things going to happen? When?" I received one last image, an alignment of dots arranged in the shape of a backward question mark. I had no idea what they were or what they meant, but I sensed they were a clue to answering my question as to when these events might take place. Before I could ask the female ET about it, however, she stepped behind me and touched me lightly on the back of my head, after which I awoke in my own bed, hoping that what had happened had all been only a bad dream. Once the regression was finished and I was finally awake, I was asked to draw the symbols I had seen. First, I drew from memory as best I could the backwards question mark the female ET had shown me. It was a fairly simple thing that took me only a moment to replicate. I wouldn't understand the significance of the drawing until later, but I felt at the time that it had immense importance. No sooner had I finished the drawing when I began sketching again, this time producing a drawing quite different in nature from the first, but one I felt equally compelled to produce. Drawing quickly, this is what I came up with. So this is a representation of one of the things that he drew. Okay, you see that was probably with just the dots. Looks like it is in reference to the backwards question mark he was talking about. And then he also drew this, some type of mathematical formula. Okay, so this is what he drew after coming out of the regression. This mathematical formula and this right here. Okay, interesting. He says, "I could see the astonishment in the faces of the observers as I completed a full page of complex equations and symbols in less than 2 minutes. And everyone, including Deborah, looked amazed once I finished writing. It was evident that no one was expecting anything like this, and even I was at a loss to explain what I had just done. Confused and scared, I was so overwhelmed with emotion that I began to weep as I tried to understand how I could have had all these things in my head. I've had a difficult enough time in school as it was. There was no way I could have come up with anything like this. I had to keep reminding myself that everything I drew on that sketch pad came from communication with the female ET. But the trickiest part was in believing that it actually had happened. It was all so surreal. What in the world is going on here? I continually muttered, embarrassed and deeply frightened. As I looked down at the sketch pad to more closely examine what I had drawn, it felt to me that the first simpler drawing seemed a little off to me. It was a series of dots in a pattern which looked much like a question mark, one with a circle around it. At the time, I was certain just what it was, but later I learned it was an alignment of the planets in our solar system. I remembered that during my abduction experience, the female ET seemed to want to let me know that something important was going to happen. When I asked when this was going to take place, this is what she showed me. Would these disasters possibly occur when the planets were aligned in this configuration? Right? But the shape of the planetary alignment I drew instinctively felt somehow incorrect. Wondering if my dyslexia may have been responsible for me drawing it backward, I later tried to redraw the planetary alignment from memory, but in doing so, I completely messed it up. While at the time I felt it was a more accurate representation, the date the alignment represented turned out to have already passed, implying that the first drawing was, aside from a few missing elements, more correct. It would take another hypnotic regression a year later to correct the diagram and provide a more accurate date. And it says, see chapter 30. Let me just jump ahead in the book and see if he shows us a more accurate drawing. I don't see the drawing redrawn. I see more charts and graphs, but not the drawing redrawn. So the other drawing, however, felt correct at the time, though what it meant was completely mysterious to me. It appeared to be a bunch of scribbling with various symbols, letters, and numbers strewn about the page. Having only a 5th grade level math competency, they meant nothing to me, and I was prepared to dismiss them as so much nonsense, but others recognized them as possibly being real equations of some kind. Curious as to whether they might be something important, we contacted several scientists who had been involved in my case and sent them copies for analysis. Nothing could have prepared me for their response. It turned out that the scribblings were real equations of some kind, with a funnel-shaped object, while the funnel-shaped object appeared to be representative of wormholes. Also pictured was the constellation Orion and the diagram of our solar system with an extra planet added, similar to my other sketch. What was most curious was that the top part of the sketch showed an equation for something called element 115, which I discovered to my dismay was not officially identified until February of 2004, a full 2 years after I created my sketch. I didn't write it down precisely. The first part should read 5F14 rather than 5614, but it was close enough to make the entire equation far more than just a lucky guess. Element 115, known unofficially as unopentium, as a synthetic element created when one bombards americium-243 with calcium ions. It has the unique ability of having an electric field greater than other elements. In stable form, it would be a powerful energy source, but being that it has a half-life measured in milliseconds, is not stable enough to do anything with, so I wasn't certain what good it was. I later found out that the two circles to the left of the equation are helium atoms, which it has been theorized could stabilize the element if bombarded by the atoms, greatly amplifying the element's gravity field to a point where it could possibly affect the shape of space around it. Theoretically, gravity distorts or wraps space by bringing 2 points close together with a powerful gravity wave, allowing for great distances to be traveled in short periods. This then would be the key to making space travel feasible. By bringing 2 points of space closer together, a craft could enter one end of the wormhole and exit the other end almost instantly, hundreds or even thousands of light years away, making interstellar flight doable. Again, that's the equation that he wrote out, coming out of his out of his hypnosis, right? His hypnotic regression, right? And it turns out that is actually an equation, so he claims, you have to do your own research, of something called element 115. And if this element 115 were bombarded with helium atoms, right, it could make it stable enough to be used as a power source that could actually make space travel possible. You could actually travel light years away in a matter of seconds or minutes. And this other one appears to be some type of diagram of the of our solar system. And for some reason, he says this planetary alignment, if it's representative of a planetary alignment, took place sometime in the past. So maybe they showed up at this point in a distant past. Who knows? You know, who knows? Maybe when we read further into the book, when I read further into the book, maybe some of this stuff will become more plain. But that's definitely interesting, right? If you want to look into that, if you want to look into his story, his name is Stan Romanek. I know it's backwards, but you can see the letters. Stan, S-T-A-N, Romanek, R-O-M-A-N-C-K, no, E-K, Romanek, M-A-N-E-K, R-O-M-A-N-E-K. Stan Romanek. The book is called Messages, and he basically tells you about his life. He tells you about the first time he saw a UFO. He's seen several in his life, and he was abducted several times. And so what I wanted to do right there is I wanted to read that one particular abduction story, because there are some people out there like me. I'm interested in this type of stuff. You see, I have the book. I've read that entire book. It's a very, you know, you got to take some of it with a grain of salt. You know, you believe or you don't believe, you know, but it's a very interesting tale. You see how he showed that. I'm gonna show y'all those 3 extraterrestrials one more time that he says he encountered. Right? These 3 extraterrestrials showed up at his apartment one night, abducted him. He gained his consciousness inside of some room. Right? He was stuck to the wall. They brought him down. They took some scrapings off his lower back. You know, they put some kind of liquid on some wounds that he had on his wrist as if to try to heal him. They even talk about one time when he broke a bone. He had broke a bone, right? And when he got abducted, the aliens actually healed his broken bone, and the doctors were amazed, and they were wondering how did his broken bone heal. And the only thing that he could attribute it to was an abduction by some aliens using the technology that they had to actually heal them. And when he asked them where did they come from, why were they here, you know, how did they get here, some of the answers and drawings that he got are these right here. Now that equation could very well be his answer to the question of how did you get here, like how do you actually do this time travel, because based on the energy source, you know what I mean, like based on your energy source and based on how you travel, time travel is actually plausible, but you have to work out the math and you have to create the energy source, and that could actually be some type of a dating system that they would use. Of course, they probably wouldn't tell them September 12th, 2001. You know, they wouldn't say June the 5th, 2019. Of course, those types of dating methods would be foreign to them. That is something that is specific to us in our time period and specific to us on the earth, because our method of tracking time is dependent upon Earth's rotation on its axis and Earth's orbit around the sun. So an individual that's not on the sun would have a completely different concept of time. You know, that's just a reality. So maybe they were trying to say, but even if I'm on this planet and you're on this planet, the planetary alignments themselves are something that we would experience and that you would experience at the same time. And so if I show you some type of planetary alignment, then however you reconcile that with your dating method, then we'll be talking about the same moment in time based on that more universal method of identifying and observing time. So Stan Romanek Messages, that's one of his abduction stories. You know, I hope that was interesting to some of you guys. If you guys aren't into aliens, you know, just go click on another video. You know what I'm saying? It's no big deal. But we can't talk about that. Before I go, as always, I got to do a little commercial, and I got to pay a little bills. As you guys know, my name is Matthew Daniels. I am the real bookworm. I am an actual published author. I do have works out there, and I'm always beseeching people to go out there, take a look at my work, order my novels, and give it a read, and just support what I got going on. This is the first novel that I ever got published. It's called Suicide Note. Go to Amazon.com. Type in Suicide Note by Matthew Daniels. Read that synopsis. You can even read a couple of the chapters for free, and you can purchase that book, right? You can purchase the paperback You can purchase the paperback version. It's over about 371 pages of fire, right? 371 pages of fire. Or you can get the ebook version for $2.99. My sophomore novel, Thicker Than Water, it's over 400 pages, right? It's over 400 pages. Solid novel, right? Solid work. You can go to Amazon.com for this as well. Type in Thicker Than Water, Thicker Than Water by Matthew Daniels, and you can order that paperback copy of my novel. If you don't like paperback, this is available in the ebook version as well. You can get the ebook version of my novel, Thicker Than Water, for $2.99. Any one of them, $2.99 ebook version. Or you can go to my Facebook page, Everything Matthew Daniels. Go to the shop section and you can order it directly from me. Cause like some people, they may want a signed copy, right? So you can go to my Facebook page, Everything Matthew Daniels. You can order it and send me a message saying that I would like it signed, and I would like it signed out to whatever your name is, whatever you like for me for it to say. As you can see, I have several cases of both books, so I have both of the books on hand. And if you order it and you want it signed, I can sign it and I can ship it out to you, and I'll actually cover the shipping cost, because it always makes me feel good when people request it with my autograph on them. People request the autograph, so I'll cover the shipping if you get it directly from me. So Amazon.com, my Facebook page, Everything Matthew Daniels, or you can go to my website. I also have a website, www.therealbookworm.com, www.therealbookworm.com. You can also purchase my novels there. But another good thing about my website is I posted a lot of videos training and coaching people how to become a better writer. You may want to be a writer as well. You may have an idea of your own novel, but you don't know how to bring it to fruition. I can help you do that. You may have a novel that you want to get published. I actually published novels myself. These two books, I published them myself. I did it. Okay, I can publish a book. If you have a book, you want to get it published, just reach out to me, and we can work out exactly what services you need, and I can quote you a price. And if you would like me to help you get your book published, I'll actually do the work and get your book published. No big deal. So just reach out to me. Go buy those books, and I hope you enjoyed this abduction story from out of the book Messages from Stan Romanek. So this your brother Matthew Daniels, aka Ampu, aka the Chosen Few, aka the Real Bookworm. I'm not a bookworm, world. I'm the real bookworm. Make sure you get it right. And as always, may your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Hotel, peace, I'm out.